All right, get this. We're diving deep into some seriously cutting-edge medical research today that kind of makes you think, hold on, is this the fountain of youth we've all been waiting for?
Oh, wow, you've got my attention. What is it?
Okay, so we're looking at this press release from Longeveron. They're a biotech company, and they're announcing their stem cell therapy, Lomecel-B, just got a fancy new name from the World Health Organization, Laromestrocel.
Laromestrocel. A name change like that, it usually means things are getting serious. It's like it's moving from just a lab experiment to a real treatment for patients.
Exactly, potentially helping people with some pretty serious conditions. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First things first, what is Laromestrocel?
Well, it's an allogeneic cellular therapy. That means it's made from cells that are taken from healthy donors, not the patient themselves. And here's where it gets really interesting. It's made from young adult bone marrow.
Wow, so like harnessing the power of youth.
Yeah, exactly. These cells, they're called mesenchymal stem cells, MSCs for short. They're like, the body's repair crew. They can help reduce inflammation, they can build new blood vessels, even stimulate the growth of new tissue.
Okay, so we've got these youthful, superpowered repair cells. What can they actually do? What conditions are we talking about here?
Right now, laromestrocel is being studied for two very different conditions, Alzheimer's disease and hyperplastic left heart syndrome, or HLHS.
Okay, so one is this devastating neurodegenerative disease that affects millions, and the other is a serious but rare heart defect in newborns. Two very different conditions, but both with huge unmet medical needs.
Exactly. And the HLHS trial, that one's ongoing. But let's talk about the Alzheimer's research first, because that's where we're seeing some interesting results. Alzheimer's is a really complex disease. There's no cure right now. And most of the treatments out there are just managing symptoms. So the idea that laromestrocel could actually modify the disease, that's incredibly exciting.
It really is. So what have they seen in the trial so far? What kind of results are we talking about?
Well, in a phase 2A trial for Alzheimer's disease, laromestrocel was shown to be safe and well tolerated. That's always the first hurdle. But even more promising is that the trial showed improvements in several measures of cognitive function, including memory and attention.
So people were actually showing signs of cognitive improvement. That's amazing. But were there any limitations to the study that we should be aware of?
Of course, it's important to remember that this was a relatively small study, and we need to see these results replicated in larger, later stage trials. But, the initial data, it's definitely encouraging. They even saw improvements in executive function, the ability to plan, organize, make decisions, the areas that are really impacted by Alzheimer's.
So potentially improving not just memory, but those higher level cognitive functions too. That would be life-changing for patients and their families. And I understand the FDA is involved as well. What's their take on all of this?
Yeah, the FDA has actually granted laromestrocel several special designations. It kind of highlights its potential. For Alzheimer's, it's received the Regenerative Medicine Advanced Therapy designation. And for HLHS, it's received Orphan Drug, Fast Track, and Rare Pediatric Diseases designations. Basically, the FDA is recognizing the promise of laromestrocel, and they're working with Longeveron to speed up the approval process.
That's definitely a good sign. It seems like things are moving in the right direction. But I bet everyone listening is wondering the same thing. Okay, this sounds great, but what does it actually mean for me? It's still early days, right?
Yeah, it is. Laromestrocel isn't actually available as a treatment yet, but getting that WHO-approved name is a big step. It means that it's on the path to potentially becoming a real option for patients.
So it's getting official in the world of medicine, like it's graduated from the lab and is now moving towards potentially changing lives. This is definitely something we'll want to keep a close eye on.
Absolutely, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We really need to see what those larger trials show before we can make any conclusions.
Okay, good enough. We've covered what Longeveron is, its potential uses, and those promising early results. But what about the bigger picture? Where does this research fit into the world of medicine? What are the implications beyond these specific conditions?
That's a great question, and that's where things get really interesting. If we can actually harness the regenerative power of young cells, what other possibilities could open up?
Yeah, we're talking about potentially changing how we approach all sorts of age-related diseases, right? And maybe even the aging process itself.
Exactly. And that brings up all sorts of questions and considerations, scientific and ethical ones.
Oh yeah, we're about to enter some deep waters here. So everyone, buckle up. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. We're back, and it's mind-blowing to think if this research actually worked out, we could be talking about a whole new era of medicine. Not just treating symptoms, but like regenerating and repairing damaged tissues.
Yeah, it really is a fascinating thought, isn't it? The implications go way beyond just Alzheimer's and HLHS.
For sure, we could be looking at a whole range of age-related conditions. Things like Parkinson's disease, arthritis, even heart failure. Conditions we can manage right now, but we can't really cure.
That's it. That's the game changer here. You've got to remember, MSCs, they have this amazing ability to reduce inflammation. They can stimulate the growth of new blood vessels, and they can even promote new tissue growth. Imagine what we could do if we can figure out how to really harness that.
Okay, I'm trying to stay calm, but it's hard not to get carried away with all this potential. Let's go back to those Alzheimer's trial results for a minute. What were some of the specific improvements they saw in cognitive function?
Well, in that phase 2A trial, they used all these standardized tests to measure cognitive abilities, and they found improvements in memory recall, attention span, even executive function, planning, decision making, problem solving.
Wow, so it's not just remembering where you put your keys, it's actually thinking more clearly and making better decisions. Those are some of the toughest things about Alzheimer's. Seeing improvement there would be incredible.
Exactly. And, we need to see these results in those bigger trials, but that early data, it's really encouraging. It's hinting that Laromestrocel might not just slow down how fast Alzheimer's progresses, but it might actually be able to reverse some of that cognitive damage.
Now, I know we talked about HLHS earlier, but can you tell me a little more about how Laromestrocel could help babies with this heart defect?
Sure, hypoplastic left heart syndrome, it's a congenital condition. So basically, the left side of the heart, it doesn't develop properly. It's really life-threatening. These babies need multiple surgeries, and even then, the long-term outlook can be tough.
So how could stem cell therapy even help with something like that, a structural heart defect? It sounds almost like science fiction.
Well, remember what we were talking about, MSCs. They can promote new blood vessels, even stimulate new heart tissue growth. The idea is that if we introduce these young, healthy cells into the baby's hearts, we can maybe encourage the heart to develop more normally so it can function better.
So it's like giving the heart a boost to help it develop the way it should, potentially even reducing the need for those risky surgeries, or at least improving things for these kids long term. That's amazing to think about.
It really is, but we have to remember this is still experimental. That HLHS trial is still going on. We need to see what happens before we know for sure if it works.
Okay, that makes sense. But I think we should at least talk about the possible risks. With any new treatment, there are risks, especially when you're talking about putting cells from someone else into the body.
You're absolutely right. There's always that chance of rejection and immune reaction, kind of like what happens with organ transplants.
Right, but are there any specific risks with Laromestrocel that we should know about?
So far in the clinical trials, Laromestrocel seems to be safe, and people tolerate it well. But like with any medical treatment, there could be side effects. We need to keep an eye on those. Researchers are looking at the long-term safety of this therapy right now.
I see, and it's important to say that anyone thinking about trying this treatment, if and when it's available, they should really talk to their doctor about the risks and benefits.
I totally agree. Informed consent and choosing the right patients, that's all going to be super important if we want to use Laromestrocel responsibly and ethically. But, let's switch gears for a minute. Let's talk about what this treatment might actually look like in practice. If Laromestrocel works out in those later trials, how do you think it would be given to patients?
Okay, so let's imagine this therapy is available. What would that experience be like for a patient?
Well, based on what we know now, it would probably be given through an IV, like an IV drip. How often and for how long, that would depend on what condition they're treating.
And would people need to stay in the hospital for that?
At first, yeah, probably. But as we learn more and things get refined, it's possible that some treatments could be done outside the hospital.
Yeah, that would make things a lot easier for patients, wouldn't it?
Definitely. And of course, they'd need to be monitored closely after each infusion to check for any side effects and to see how they're responding to the treatment. It's a whole new way of thinking about medicine. It'll take some time to figure out how to use this technology the best way.
It's like we're on the verge of a medical revolution. But you said earlier, there are bigger things to consider. Not just the clinical stuff. This research brings up some really deep questions about aging, living longer, what it all means for society.
Yeah, it really does. If we can treat or even reverse age-related diseases, what does that mean for how long we live? What about our healthcare systems? It changes everything about how our society works. These are questions we need to start thinking about now while the research is still going on.
Wow, it's a lot to take in, but it's also really exciting. This press release, it's about a new name for a stem cell therapy, but it's opened up this whole world of possibilities and challenges.
It really has, and it shows that scientific advances, they don't happen on their own. They have these ripple effects that go way beyond the lab. They affect all parts of our lives.
Well, we've given everyone a lot to think about today. We've talked about the science, the potential, the risks, and the amazing implications this research has for society. It's a lot to process, but it's also really exciting to be a part of this as it unfolds.
It is, and I think the important thing for everyone listening is stay informed, stay involved, and don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. The future is being shaped right now, and we all have a part in making it.
So we've talked about the science and the potential, all the excitement around Laromestrocel. But, there's this whole other side to this story. Like, what does it mean for society if we can actually extend how long people live and how healthy they are, especially in such a dramatic way?
It's like science fiction is becoming reality. We've always been fascinated by living longer, right? And now it might actually happen.
Exactly. And that brings up so many questions, like what happens to retirement if we can slow down or even reverse aging? Are people going to be working into their 80s, 90s, and even 100s?
It's possible, yeah. And then you have to think about what that means for the workforce, how wealth gets passed down between generations. Even things like Social Security. We might have to rethink everything about how our society works, our ideas about work and free time, all of it.
And what about healthcare? It's already struggling, right? Imagine if people are living decades longer, maybe with even more health problems. Could our healthcare systems even handle that?
That's a good point. We'd need to put a lot more focus on preventing things and managing long-term conditions. And we'd have to find ways to make healthcare more affordable and accessible. For a lot more older people, it's a huge challenge, but it's also a chance to do things better. Maybe create a healthcare system that's fairer and works for everyone.
It's like we're at the beginning of something brand new, not just in medicine, but for society as a whole. And like with anything new, there are going to be challenges and opportunity.
Exactly. And we need to start talking about all this now. While the research is still happening, we need honest conversations about what it means ethically, socially, economically, if people start living a lot longer.
So where do we even start? How do we even begin to think about something this big? It's almost too much.
It is a lot, but I think the first thing is just to accept that this research could have a huge impact. And then we have to start talking about what kind of future we want. And it can't just be scientists and politicians. We need ethicists, philosophers, regular people, everyone.
Yeah, it's a conversation everyone needs to be part of, from families talking at the dinner table to governments making decisions.
Exactly. We need to be planning ahead, not just reacting. We need to see the challenges coming and figure out how to deal with them. And be ready for the good things, too.
Well, I think we've done a good job of explaining all of this to everyone listening. We've talked about the science, what it could mean, the risks, and how this research could change society in some really big ways. It's a lot to take in, but it's exciting to be a part of this.
It really is. And, the most important thing for everyone listening is to stay informed, keep learning about this, and don't be afraid to ask questions, the tough ones, too. The future is happening right now, and we all have a part in making it.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into regenerative medicine. It has the potential to change our bodies and our whole world. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep imagining what's possible.
Absolutely. And remember, the future isn't something that just happens to us. We create it together.